What's your thoughts on government cover-ups or covert societies attempting to control humanity? Do you believe in ancient astronauts, intergalactic communication, or extraterrestrial visitations? Ever had an experience with disembodied spirits or the paranormal universe? Are these subjects fact or fiction? Each week, Tony and Eddie explore these unbelievable realities and beyond. Exclusively on Truth Be Told.
Hello and welcome to Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Tony Sweet, and with me now, world-renowned psychic,
Eddie Connor, hi.
Hey.
We're at the Conscious Life Expo, and we have with us Blake Bauer. He's written a book called You Were Not Born to Suffer, which we're going to find out why. And he's got a bunch of conferences and retreats, well, not retreats, but he's got some conferences going on downstairs at the expo tomorrow and Sunday. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I want to jump in. It's called Beyond Suffering. Where did you get the title from?
Well, Beyond Suffering comes from my book title, You Were Not Born to Suffer. And actually, I was just talking about this the other day with somebody. I, for a lot of years, have seen clients one-on-one.
Yeah.
And when I started working with people, helping people to transform their struggles in life, I would sit there and I'd say, you know, we didn't come here to suffer. I would look, you know, at my client
Right.
and say, you know, we didn't come here to suffer. We didn't come here to stay stuck in this misery and this, you know, disease. And then, you know, as I wrote my book and was searching for a title, You Were Not Born to Suffer kind of arose as a great message, and it's had a huge impact on a lot of people. And it's ironic because you'll see down at the expo downstairs, and I do these expos all over the world, people walk by, and when they read You Were Not Born to Suffer, the response is unbelievable, because a lot of people don't even have a template in their mind to accept that. So what they typically read is, You were born to suffer.
Yeah.
And so then they do a double take. And if they read, You were not born to suffer, then some people will respond with, well, I was born to suffer. Or you get the playful ones who will say, no, I was not born to suffer. So it's amazing to watch the reaction that it causes in people.
And how many years have you been doing what you're doing now? So you're an alternative medicine practitioner. And how many years have you been doing that?
Well, among other things.
He's got a litany of wonderful things on his bio here.
I've been working with people for about 10 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder, would you say that people suffer in the United States with things slightly different than in the UK?
A little bit. I think the bigger difference happens in the developing countries, in underdeveloped countries.
Yeah.
In fact, like I'm getting ready to relaunch my book, and I've asked the Dalai Lama for a foreword to the next edition of my book because I think there's such a huge gap in teachings like Buddhist teachings here in the West, where you're encouraged to be selfless and kind and compassionate, and my teaching is all about how it's our relationship to ourself that determines how we relate to other people. So because most of us are quite critical and judgmental and aggressive with ourselves, that's how we actually treat other people, even if we don't admit that or aren't honest about our thinking or how we judge or compare. So in the West, for me, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys, it was key for me to learn to love myself unconditionally in a healthy way, and that's what actually helped me bring down my ego walls and my arrogance and my judgment of other people and self-consciousness and all those things.
Which I would think would translate to giving yourself permission to be a masculine dude and allow vulnerability and affection in a world that's pretty dominated by masculine stereotypes.
Exactly.
How hard was that how hard is it to be vulnerable and be coming from your self-love place in a world that almost teaches the opposite?
Well, when I didn't love myself, so in the beginning it was very hard. Today it's easy, and if I were to try and not be vulnerable or to pretend to live in some kind of mask or ego, that today would be too hard for me. But when I first started and I was very insecure and guilty and ashamed of myself and angry and hurting, it was very, very hard to be vulnerable and be open, because to do that, your heart has to be open, you have to feel everything. And as men in general, and it's the same for all human beings, we're scared of feeling because we haven't felt safe. We haven't been given permission to express our emotions. And actually that really is tied up with the root cause of all depression and disease in both men and women. And that's really the focus of my work. And giving ourselves permission to be happy and healthy is a key. It's so important because a lot of us, it's amazing how many of my clients come in and they feel guilty for wanting to do the things that make them feel good.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, you're such a bad person for wanting to go to a yoga class.
Right.
You're such a bad person for wanting to eat a salad when everybody else wants to eat pizza. You're like, you know what I mean? No, but a lot of people feel so guilty. Like, for example, a lot of women, mothers, like the family wants to eat one thing, but the mother wants to eat something, or someone else in the family wants to eat, differently. And it's like we're made to feel wrong for who we are.
And I'm going to ask, because this kind of just popped in my head, about how many of us suffer through life, and that is sometimes the biggest growth in our life. So how can you explain when it says we are not meant to suffer when some of our biggest growth is during our suffering? So how do you explain that?
Well, I agree with you 100%. And so the key is to understand. For me, I needed to understand what was the purpose of my suffering, and where was it guiding us. And this is really what my book is about. Is that all of our suffering is a cry from our soul asking us to love ourselves. And then I break down what that means. So how to accept yourself, how to believe in yourself, how to be true to yourself, how to express your emotions clearly and kindly and respectfully, so they don't get stuck inside you and become toxicity and disease, depression and disease, and then relationship problems and money problems. So suffering is a part of human life, but a lot of us get stuck there in disease and depression and misery, and life is meant to be hard. Marriage is supposed to be hard. You can't love what you do. You can't love your spouse, like you're in it for the long run, like all these limiting beliefs that we have. So yes, suffering is a part of human existence, and in my experience, it's like your rudder on a boat. It's a GPS. It helps you to navigate. This situation feels good and feels healthy. This situation doesn't feel good, doesn't feel healthy, so I need to shift to focus more on what I want, more on what feels good, what feels authentic. So it helps us to navigate. And then spiritually and emotionally, the biggest part of suffering in my experience, like why the universe created suffering, or if you believe in God, why God created suffering. And if you believe you're one with the universe and one with God, then the question is, why did you create suffering? And in exploring these questions, the answer that I realized was that suffering is created really to bring love into physical form, because through suffering we learn to forgive, which is the essence of unconditional love. So we've all made mistakes, quote unquote mistakes. We've all allowed people to mistreat us. We've all mistreated others. And what we have to learn because of that is to forgive ourselves for, letting someone speak to us, negatively, or let someone walk all over us, or let someone use us, or to touch the fire when we knew we were going to get burned. The lesson underneath that is that we have to learn to forgive ourselves, and as we master that, we become capable of forgiving other people, the people who have hurt us, because they're hurting and they never learn to love themselves. And that's really the essence of unconditional love, which is what we're all looking for. That's what we're all looking for every day. And often don't realize it. Right, exactly. They're quick to forgive.
That's right. Well, you say you've been doing this 10 years, and I'm not going to say your age, but you're still fairly young. But when you started, you were quite a bit young.
Yes.
So I know you also do past life regressions. Have you done any past life regressions where because you seem like an old soul, or you've done this before, like a spiritual teacher or something before. Have you went through any states where you said that's where I got it from?
Yes.
Or you have?
Yeah. Well, as I studied and I learned in this life, things would unlock, and I would have a certain certainty about things.
Right.
But it's a sensitive topic, because I don't want to be perceived as being arrogant about these things. But when I went to India for a while, and in India, I went to a Buddhist Lama who was an astrologer, and I also went to a Vedic Swami who was an astrologer. So I had these two different readings, one from a Swami and one from a Lama, and both of them told me that I had been enlightened in my last lifetime and chose to come back to help as many people as I could in this lifetime. And the truth is, so I woke up around 18 and I was suffering very deeply, and I was so tortured in my mind and so tortured in my heart that I isolated myself from all friends, all family, and all I did was focus on my healing. I published my book when I was 27 years old. It was the #1 best-selling self-help book in Australia by the time I was 29.
Wow.
And
That's crazy.
And I've worked with now like 30,000 people myself and have like 70,000 followers on social media at the moment. So, you know, it resonates,
Right.
you know. So, you know, I was suffering so deeply in this lifetime, and I believe I chose that, but that's a whole nother kind of kettle of fish to go into. Based on the idea that we choose our beliefs, and for me that's the most liberating way to look at life, just functionally, practically. But I was suffering so deeply that all I wanted was freedom from that suffering, to be healthy and happy, but also to know why I came to the planet. And that became the focus of all my time and energy. And when I finally found the answers I was looking for, and I felt I had figured it out, and you know, I humbly say that, but I say that with certainty because I do know what I was looking for, and knew when I found it that I had to share it with as many people as I could, and life seems to support me to do that.
Yeah, no, to see your growth and from a young age to this age, it's very amazing, and you could tell it was a life purpose. So
yes,
yeah,
it's like, you know, there's a point where it comes where it's like, you know, you don't have a choice anymore. It's like, because if you don't do what you love, or you don't do what you came here to do, you're going to suffer. If you're not true to yourself with your friends, your family, you're going to suffer.
And isn't it funny that you get to a point in your life, I think we all do, to a point where we think we can't suffer anymore, and then we ask ourselves really bad questions like, could this get any worse? Could this hurt me worse than it already does? And of course the answer is always, it sure can.
Right. Or how do I take my life?
And then how to break open from there. So I love that you saw the Swami.
Yes.
And then the Lama.
Yes.
So it's like a Swami Lama.
Sounds like a cocktail.
Yeah, it does. It's like a metaphysical conference.
Take two.
Like
Give me a
Swami
double.
Lamas with extra sugar. Now you're talking about unconditional self-love mastery. Now tomorrow, Saturday at 12 noon, which is February the 20th, downstairs at the Conscious Life Expo, you're going to be presenting this.
Yes.
What is the #1 golden thread that goes through that for you when you're speaking in front of an audience?
Well, I try to help people to understand how to love themselves unconditionally and practically in their life now.
And that's from the waist up.
Yes, exactly. It's so funny you were talking about like the male like response to vulnerability, because most heterosexual tough guys think of self-love as masturbation, and it's not.
But that's, you know, he's so right.
Although you can please yourself in that way. That's not a bad thing either. But that's only one little part.
Yeah, and I'm going to digress a little, just a little. The other thing, men, most heterosexuals, not all, they will interpret love, frequency, affection, appreciation. They'll start to interpret it with an erection.
Right. It's because we become ashamed of our emotions.
Yeah. And then we're trying to hide it.
Right, and that's why all the energy goes there.
Yeah.
And then that's why all of our relationship and marital problems
bring
out all of our emotional pain.
Which then activates all the old patterns and programming from when we were under 10 years old, and then we start sabotaging the very best thing that's ever happened to us in love.
Exactly, the pain body that we inherit, you know, in our childhood, and then we just, you know, mirror what we saw from our parents.
Yeah, oh my God. So the golden thread, before I interrupted you, in the Unconditional Self-Love Mastery workshop tomorrow is?
Well, you know, the golden thread is what we were talking about before, about giving yourself permission. And what that ties back to is that as little children, we learn to feel guilty for existing.
Yes.
And we learn to feel guilty for our feelings. So we subconsciously, most people feel like they're a burden, whether they often don't realize this, but they do. And that's because our parents are typically struggling and not happy and don't know how to love themselves, and they're trying to make ends meet. And so what that leads us to do as children, which we carry through our whole life, so anybody listening to this right now, you're doing this to some degree in your life right now, is we learn to reject ourselves. And what that means is we learn to reject what we feel, we learn to reject what we want, our desires, we learn to reject what we need, and we learn to reject our dreams, our purpose, and that makes us sick and miserable. And that's really the essence of learning to love yourself unconditionally, and the key to forgiving yourself is that you learn to be true to yourself in every single moment of every day with kindness and respect, but with clarity, and to overcome your fear of losing love, your fear of being judged, your fear of losing approval or support, and that's really the thread.
And then also sometimes your fear of being loved.
Right.
And not messing it up when it gets here.
Yes.
There's this thing that's starting to come through in readings and workshops and seminars that I do. And it's like hit me between the eyes in the last 3 weeks, and I would love your perspective on it. Yes. And that is what the guides and angels, whatever you want to call it, keep harping on, sorry, wrong adjective, is that when a human really wants something, to hold it in 4 different areas of the body simultaneously. And that is the gut brain, the empathic part of us, as if you will. I call it the solar plexus megaphone. So to hold it here as purely as you can. Let's say it's for love.
Right.
To hold this with no contradiction. To hold it in your heart with no contradiction. Then you've amplified twice. Your brain with no contradiction, and then try to hold it all through your body in those 4 areas. So what I'm learning is that each of these areas that I just spoke about carry different belief systems than the other areas. Right. So the heart might have the desire for love, but it is also the biggest fear of getting hurt. Right. The gut instinct has the desire, but not as much fear. And then the brain has its programming. But it's fascinating to see how these different levels of consciousness per thought get activated, and they're either working against you or they're working for you. Can you speak to that based on your expertise? And
yes, I think that's a really interesting perspective. And one thing I try to do is to make things very simple and practical for a lot of people, because sometimes a lot of this work can become so complicated that people are trying to remember some kind of formula, and it's hard for them. So for me, a lot of all of this comes back to the insecurity that's born when I talk about this dynamic of feeling like a burden or feeling guilty as children. So basically, we all learn to settle for crumbs of love when we're kids.
Child, that's a chapter in a book. Crumbs of love right here.
We learn to settle for crumbs of love and crumbs of happiness and crumbs of attention and crumbs of affection and physical touch. And so what happens, let's say the 3 of us are brothers and we have the same parents and we're only getting crumbs, right? And you're the eldest and I'm the middle,
and you're the baby. Give us.
Right, exactly, because they still are, they don't know, they didn't find the loaf for themselves yet. Yeah. So they don't.
Wow, a whole loaf.
Right. We don't even know the loaf exists. No. So, but let's say we're brothers, and all there is this one crumb, right? We're going to become pretty competitive over that crumb, and we're going to become so scared of losing that crumb. So if we say to mom or dad, I feel hurt, and they react because they're stressed or they're busy, we might not get even the crumb that we're being given. So we're like starving for it. So that's where all of our insecurity comes from.
So what was your modus operandi with the one crumb? What did you do to earn the crumb? Mine was become a workaholic. Yes. And an adult child who was invisible, who did the work before I was ever asked to do it. What was yours?
Well, my issues were always about pleasing, just pleasing as much as I could. And my relationship to women has really been defined by that I felt like I had to please them to be loved, that I wasn't lovable enough just the way I am. For the first time in my life, I can say, I feel enough. Like I feel lovable and deserving and worthy of love.
That's good.
And for a number of years, I didn't. And so I would always please to mask my insecurity and to think I had to do that to keep love in my life. And it caused me so much suffering. And I think it's underneath all of our patterns that cause us suffering, whether we're seeking security or love or attention or support. And it all goes back to this dynamic of not knowing how to give ourselves permission to be happy and healthy, which means we have to give ourselves permission to be ourselves. Well, how do we be ourselves? We express what we're feeling authentically in every situation, no matter what. Even if we come off like a quack or it doesn't come out clear right away.
Makes you feel uncomfortable or whatever.
Exactly, or vulnerable, or you could get hurt or judged. But then you get this choice. You either run the risk of being rejected by somebody else, or you reject yourself. And the pain of rejecting yourself is 1,000,000 times worse than the pain of being rejected by somebody else.
However, when you're doing it growing up, you literally brainwash yourself to think that hurting yourself hurts less than someone else hurting your feelings. So you wire it back asswards, right?
Exactly, and that's what we're all struggling to untie. And it's survival, because if we piss off mom and dad and everybody at school, right?
You don't get no crumbs.
Right. You're not going to get any crumbs. You'll be kicked out. You'll be put up for adoption. You know what I mean?
That's how the little brain, the little 7 and under brain works. And then some fucking church mouse comes running out and takes your crumb. Sorry, John, we'll let you edit that. Sorry.
Well, I actually have an example, and I'd like to hear an example that something that you did, because when I was in my early 20s, that I was like Eddie. I was just non-existent. I mean, I was the good boy and excelled in what I did, but I felt non-existent. Right. And it wasn't they was seeking me out, but I joined a modeling agency because I wanted to get over shyness. Yeah. And it wasn't become a model, it wasn't become a star or nothing to get exposure. I just really wanted to push myself in front of people where it made me so uncomfortable. Totally. And it did make a difference. Could you tell our audience maybe something that you did that to give them the courage to do that?
Absolutely. Okay, John, this is where you flash up the pictures of him as a Chippendale. And go.
You're right.
No.
I thought I hid those.
Not me.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're an Aussie.
No, I'm not. I lived in Australia for
because that's the thunder from down under. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Eddie would know.
What did you do?
Well, first, what I wanted to point out is that that whole dynamic when we're kids is basically we learn that we don't matter. Right. Because we are not just our physical body, we're our emotions and our thoughts, what's going on inside. So we learn, when we make our feelings wrong and keep them in, we learn to feel that we don't matter. So what you were describing is a symptom of like, I don't matter. Right. And then what we do is we seek attention and recognition externally to feel that we matter. And this is going on for everybody.
No,
okay.
This is
and
great.
even for me, even with my book, the publishing of my book, I mean, my book was my journey of learning to master loving myself unconditionally. So even throughout launching my book, I noticed there was a part of me, like when I was seeking for publishers to publish me, I was like, it was like mom and dad. It was like, please tell me that my wisdom has value. Please tell me I matter.
Validate me.
Yeah, I was looking for the recognition I never learned to give to myself. So that's the key to transcend. I didn't get, but I didn't learn to give to myself. And once you do that, then there's nothing outside of your power to heal or change or achieve when you're not seeking it externally anymore.
Wow.
So,
you know what's funny about that? We're talking about love, and you're saying we're always striving to be validated. But you have to validate yourself before anybody else will date you, okay?
and we're the love we're seeking.
Yeah.
And it took me so long, and I went to 5 universities and studied with all these spiritual masters just to realize that I was the love that I was seeking. And through learning to love myself, I healed all the pain from not loving myself. And then there was just this source of love and peace inside of me that was my soul or the universe or God or whatever you want to call it. And we just play this sick game with ourselves because we just never learn. And then we're totally wired from fear, to hurt ourselves.
Two of my favorite quotes that I think encapsulate that is, I think it's Frederick Langbridge. He says, 2 men look through the same bars. One sees mud, the other stars. And my other favorite quote is, you don't get the money you want, you get the money you are. You don't get the love you want, you get the love that you are. Yes. And you don't get the respect you want, you get the respect that you are.
Yes. I agree.
You just made me feel smart.
You are smart. You are smart.
I got me in trouble.
You are. But that's the thing, we can learn to bake the loaf ourselves. That's the key.
Right.
You become a baker, like you fish for your own soul. Like I could give you the bread or you can bake it yourself. I can give you the fish or I can teach you how to fish for yourself.
And then what happens as soon as we get to that place that you're talking about where we're healed, whole, and healthy, then we share. And then we also learn not to give your breadcrumbs and your loaves to every whiny, sucky, bitchy, moany vampire out there because we're not here to please them. We're here to stay in our wholeness.
Yes.
And then as we possess that and own it more and more frequently, don't you find that you start attracting healed, whole, and healthy people?
Yes.
And so how long did it take you to do that?
To start attracting?
Yeah, healed, whole, and healthy people. I mean, besides everybody in the room.
Well, I think I'm still working on it.
Oh, me too.
I think every day we're tested. Like I like to say, it doesn't matter how much you've been true to yourself today or loved yourself today or valued yourself today. Yeah. Tomorrow you're going to be tested. So someone who, is struggling might come up or someone who's needy might come up and you're going to be tested again, So
Blake, what would be one of your triggers? Like we can be feeling really good. We can be walking through the expo feeling all cute and stuff. And then somebody would be like, he wore that blouse. And I'm like,
do you know what one of my triggers is?
Yeah.
When I hold the door for someone, they don't say
oh my God, me too. And I had to really look at that. One time my guides literally said, oh, so are you holding the door open because you want something?
Right.
And I'm like, but I did and didn't even know it. But I'm a nice person by nature.
Right.
Don't ask Tony about that.
Right.
But I'm nice by nature.
Full of... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk off there.
Yeah. So what's your trigger?
Actually, that is one. It irritates me when people, manners, or somebody drives down the opposite, opposite way to get a parking spot.
Or breaks in front of people.
Which there was once that I actually got out of the car because, which was stupid. My mom was like, I can't believe you didn't get shot. But there was a car in front of me and the car came down the wrong way and parked. So I just got out of the car, knocked on the window and said, yeah, you need to move your car because you came down the wrong way. This car's waiting. It shocked the hell out of them. They moved, but I probably would have gotten shot at one point. But it irritates me when people disrespect other people.
You were lucky it wasn't Kathy Bates from Fried Green Tomatoes.
Right?
Should be like...
better insurance.
Men's bathrooms are horrible. Like public bathrooms where, like people leave stuff on the seats. Women are a bit more respectful, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Sometimes.
Well, I've not been in a woman's restroom much lately, but...
But I used to, back in the day when I was thin and cute and didn't even know it, and I was a dancer. I was scouted out by like the biggest dance team. That makes it sound gay. The biggest straight stripper. Yes. Company. Yeah, and there were all these big muscle men, and they wanted me to come in and be part of their team. Well, I did for one night at 220 Seafood in Greensboro, North Carolina. You don't strip in a seafood restaurant. Because you can't tell what the smell really is. But true story, I had never in my entire life seen women behave worse than men. And I was shocked. But I had to use the ladies' restroom there. It was horrific. But in general, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry, I had a flashback. I got triggered. So what's your favorite thing about talking about these subjects?
I was talking to a gentleman last night when we were setting up here for the expo, and he's an author and, starting out on his journey. And I said, the biggest part of all of this is when someone comes and says to you, this has totally changed my life. When another soul, another person looks in my eyes and says, I've benefited really from my suffering. And that's what keeps me going, and that's what makes really my life worth living in a big way, is that all the suffering I've been through and anything that arises that is very challenging, it always becomes worth it because I learned something to enjoy my life more, but I also learned something that I'm then able to communicate through my book or through an interview or in some way to other people, and it makes their life better, and that makes my suffering worth it. So that's what I would.
I'm curious, what do you think is the biggest misconception connected to or attached to men like you in the metaphysical self-help spiritual movement? What do you think is the biggest misconception from women toward men like you in this movement?
Well, those are two loaded questions.
They are. Yeah, because I can't wait to hear your answer.
I'll start with the first one. So
okay.
With men, men, because we've learned to be ashamed of our emotions, and women do this too, collectively we do this. We've been hurt. We were hurt as children, and we get hurt throughout life. So we all take this elevator up to our head and live in our head and think that we're going to be safe and that we can control everything. And if we plan every day and every experience perfectly, we won't get hurt. We don't leave ourselves open to the unknown. And men tend to do that more. And then all the social constructs that we've come out of, but where like the man provides and the woman stays at home, that only fed that to be worse, because men are thinking about planning and taking care of things and money, but they're even more and more disconnected from their heart and who they are. Yeah. And today that's starting to change a lot, which manifests as a lot of people being perceived as irresponsible. Yeah. But really they're just struggling to find themselves and to be true to themselves. And that doesn't mean I don't think we should, be accountable for the things that we do and create, but that's an underlying symptom. So I think as men need a very logical, rational understanding of this, which I needed myself, but also too, I think as a man, and as a heterosexual male, I think you were kind of referring to, it's like we want to respect men. Like it's all about like, oh, I think he's cool, or I respect him, and I think it's true for all humans. We want to respect the person that we're taking advice from, and so I think a lot of times, with the spiritual world, we have everything from chakras and angel readings and psychics, and a lot of people are so closed off that they can't bridge that gap. It's like that's too far to the left, or too extreme, so we need kind of a bridge, so I think maybe sometimes my work can be a bridge for those types of people who aren't completely open to the more alternative spiritual world and still need something that's kind of practical on the, because to be here on the earth fully, I think a lot of us struggle to be here on the earth fully, and because we've been hurt in our life, we learn to kind of live outside of our body, and a lot of times we live in angelic realms or other types of spiritual realms still, even in the spiritual world, because it can feel so hard to embody the love that we are because of these deeper issues that we all struggle with. So that's not just a male issue in this field, it's also a female issue in this field. And then, so the second question was women
projecting their stuff onto you. I found me one. He's spiritual. He's open-minded. He knows what a G-spot is.
You should probably talk to my ex-partner, because she'd probably be the one to be more objective about the type of energy that came at me, because sometimes maybe I couldn't see my own blind spot.
Well, yeah.
Because I had this, I had my own purity of just wanting to share the truth, but then I think I also had my own naivety of my own shadow or my own blind spot of looking for love or recognition, as I was talking about, and which all came back to me just not knowing how to value myself. So I think so sometimes I've attracted maybe. I think I've attracted women to value me when I didn't value myself.
Right.
I've attracted men to value me when I haven't valued myself. Yeah. And then we all, as men and as women, we project our mother and our father issues onto other men and women. So, symbolically, a male can be the love that dad never gave you. For sure. And as a woman, it can be, the love that mom never gave you, in the spirit, as a spiritual teacher or healer, or so they're deep. There's so many layers, so that was a very loaded question.
That's great question. That's great answers.
Great answers and loaded questions, but you articulated it from your gut and your heart, which I really appreciated.
Can we, because we still have some time, but I want to go over a couple of your workshops again, because a lot of people won't be able to see you here at the expo. A lot of people tuning in are from all over the world, and I kind of would like to maybe give them a few suggestions, because beyond suffering, how can people? You say love yourself. Well, how do we get started to do that? How do we get started? Maybe a couple things. Is it meditation? Is it looking in a mirror? Gosh darn, people like me type of thing. I mean, give us some examples of what you can get them started on this journey.
Well, a few things quickly come to mind. One, the Conscious Living Expo is live streaming all over the world. So like on my Facebook page, there's a link. You can go to and click the live stream. So Blake Bauer on Facebook, and then You Were Not Born to Suffer. on Facebook, and you can watch the keynotes. And I think only the panel I'm on, as far as my participation. But there's lots of great teachers, obviously, here to watch. So that's a great support network for people who are international. Otherwise, the leaps, because everything are these leaps of faith that we're starting to take.
Right.
And the most important leap and the most effective leaps are to start being honest in your life right now. So if you're in a situation where you're not happy, or you're not at peace, or something's not right, it's important to admit that first to yourself and then to somebody else, so to start to talk about it. So if you're not happy in a relationship, that's the big leap. It's not leaving the relationship. The big leap is saying, I'm not happy, or something's missing here, or I feel like we lost the spark. Or if you're in a job that you're not happy with, it's admitting that, I'm not happy in this job. What else?
You admit it to yourself or to your boss?
Well, first to yourself, and then
I'm not happy here.
Yeah, but you can, right,
Yeah.
right. And if that doesn't seem appropriate, some people are in a certain work environment where they can be that authentic because they're friends with their boss, or they're really high up in a company and they're still struggling with the same lesson. But you can start to ask yourself, what else is possible? What else could I do? How else could I make a living?
Right.
What am I interested in that I never gave myself permission to study? So those are the most important leaps, because it always comes back to being true to yourself in every situation. So to speak and act based on your truth in your personal life and your professional life, and to do it in a non-violent way where you don't point the finger, but where you say, I feel, I want, I need. You're taking responsibility for what you're thinking and feeling in the present. And that's the key, no matter where you are on the journey, no matter what, so that you're speaking and acting in alignment, which keeps your energy moving, which keeps your blood moving, which keeps your emotions going, which prevents depression, prevents disease, and prevents situations that are created from destruction. Because when you create a relationship or a job from a lie, or it's not the truth, or it's not being authentic, it's not going to end well. No. It's going to be a tough lesson. So I think that's the biggest leap, is to speak and act based on your truth, even when you're scared. That's the key. It's not that you're not scared, it's that you learn to do it when you are scared, because you have to.
AKA vulnerability and self-love.
Yes, and I found that we have a choice in life. There's one of two choices. You either respect yourself because you found the courage to be real and true to yourself, even if you're scared shitless. I don't know if we have to edit that out.
No.
And so you either you get to respect yourself, or you get to feel sorry for yourself. Ooh. And you get one of two choices. And every time you let your fear stop you, so you don't say what you want to say or feel like saying, or you don't act based on your truth because of fear, you're hurting yourself. So every time you become the victim of your fear. So anybody who feels like the victim in their life, if they look deeper, they'll see that they're the victim of their own fear-based thinking and their own fear-based beliefs and thoughts, or insecure thoughts. Right. So it's like, I want to say this, but then I have the excuse that if I say that, I'm going to lose love, or I'm going to lose money, or I'm going to get divorced, or they're going to leave me, or they're going to know what I really feel, and now I lost control of the situation. So, and then we feel like a victim, and we feel sorry for ourselves, and then we complain and we blame.
Right. And then there's also the people that, especially living in Los Angeles, there's the confidence, and then they're loving yourself, and then the ego portion of the self-love. And I think those two are so different, and then one's toxic, and of course one is completely.
Absolutely.
So what do you speak to those people that understand that they got an ego, and what can they do to start transitioning into more of a brighter light of love?
Well, I think first is the perspective, having a clear perspective. Right. One part of my book is a teaching that is not very common, which is that as children, we're like a caterpillar, and we create the ego as an act of self-love to protect us from pain and to give us control over our environment, because as kids we don't feel we have control. So I actually believe that we create our ego as an act of self-love to mask pain and to protect us from pain, until we have the tools and the awareness necessary to learn to love ourselves, heal the pain, and then break free like a butterfly to live as a free and full expression of who we really are. So whenever I work with people, I don't buy into that surface level BS, if you will, or kind of the ego part. It's really like, you'll make a joke and I don't laugh. You know,
Right.
or it's like, so what's underneath that? So what's really going on? Let's really get to it. And I think if you sit in a place of truth, it's like harmony, like resonance. It brings the person back to that. There's a recognition. You know, it's kind of like you can't hide in the light. You know, you can't you just can't hide.
And how do you protect yourself from other people's energies?
That's an important question. So again, in a lot of spiritual and psychic work and energy healing, there's actually a lot of fear masked as spiritual techniques.
Yes.
And so what I've learned, and I do, energy healing and very powerful energy healing, and I do less of it today, like hands-on healing, because it seems like life wants me to speak to groups and more people at once. But this is the key. I believe that, so all the energy in the universe is made up of the same atoms, the same substance. So I believe our soul, the light in our eyes, is the same as starlight, the same as the sun. Okay, so it's all the same light. And so I believe our soul, or the light that comes out of our eyes, is the same as the sun or starlight. And what I realized in myself is that as I learned to love myself and take really good care of my body and my emotions and my mind, that I purified the toxins, like physical toxins from food and the environment. I purified the emotional toxins from, my childhood and heartbreak and pain, and from not loving myself. And that unlocked more light and love inside of me, so that I wasn't trapped. My soul, who I really am, wasn't trapped in hiding. It was filling my body, so that light and that love that we are fills our body fully. And I found that I became more and more like the sun. And I think that's the truth for everybody who's on a healing or spiritual path, that as the light grows inside of you, as the love grows inside of you, you become more like the sun or like a star. And what happens to any darkness that approaches the sun?
It just like,
Yeah, it just turns into light. It's transformed immediately. So if you come from the place of fear, I'm afraid of taking this on, I'm afraid of taking this on. The only reason you're taking something on is because you still have a lesson to learn around the same issue. And if you've mastered the lesson, there's no fear of taking anything on.
That's true.
That's why, I think teachings about Jesus, like he never, he wouldn't turn people away. Like he was the light that embraced, and I'm not Christian or Catholic, but I respect him as a teacher, and he was the light that embraced everybody. There was no judgment. There was just total love inside of him, and he could transform anything that was in his field.
Which is what I love about Abraham Hicks.
Yes.
He's one of my favorite teachers, and they speak about Christ often. And whenever he was walking the earth plane, that he would create the healing because he would see them as already who they really were, as a light being first. And then the dis-ease would melt away. And then he would say, go forth and don't tell a single soul what just happened here, because you're going to talk yourself right back into dis-ease if you're not careful.
Right. And that's, again, it just goes back to all the things that we've made wrong and rejected inside of ourselves. So we haven't been loving ourselves to let the love and the light that we are out.
Yeah.
Just to be it.
I love that. So we're with Blake Bauer. We literally have about 4 minutes left. And Saturday, February the 20th, which is tomorrow, you're going to be speaking about unconditional self-love mastery, which you've beautifully articulated with us today. And then on Sunday at 1 p.m., February the 21st, you're going to be speaking about the purpose of depression and disease. Yes. Now that title has to get people's attention.
Yes, it was actually published. That was published in a bunch of the magazines in California over the last few months, and the feedback has been unbelievable. But basically, I outline logically and rationally how we make ourselves miserable and sick by this process of internalizing our emotions from when we're children, making ourselves wrong, how that causes the energy in the body to slow down, which then causes the blood in the body to slow down, which then leads to coagulations of cells and fluids in the body, which are like masses and nodules and tumors that become cancer, autoimmune conditions, and physical pain. Like in Chinese medicine, pain is stagnant blood.
Wow.
And stagnant blood comes from blood that's not moving because we're too afraid to express ourselves, or we're too afraid to act based on our truth. Like when you're inspired and you're moving through the world happy and purposeful, you're moving, and literally your energy in your blood is moving. But when you're sitting at a job you hate and you're sitting at a desk all day, right, your energy and your blood are not moving. So you get pain in your body, you get sick. And that's your body crying out for you to love yourself and take care of yourself. So when you can't show up to work tomorrow, your body's actually telling you this place is not healthy for you. You're thinking about it's not healthy for you.
And then whenever your body starts slowing down, your breathing slows down, the blood slows down, you start reaching for the physical things you think are going to pep you up, like Coca-Cola and Snickers bars.
Right, exactly, because the vibration of those things are the same. And a lot of us think we need to be sick to be loved. So we make ourselves sick. This is so important, and this is hard for people to swallow. We make ourselves miserable and sick to get attention, to get love, because we don't know how else to ask for it, and we don't know how to give it to ourselves.
Child, I just saw baby Jesus just now. Let me tell you, I call that attention junkie-itis, because so many people confuse attention with love.
Right.
And attention and love are not the same thing. You can dance on a casket on Easter Sunday in church and get attention.
Right.
That don't mean they loving you for your tap dancing skills on that mahogany coffin.
Right. You sound like you know from experience.
Well, I was a stripper. So we also want to tell everybody about your book, You Were Not Born to Suffer, and where can they get it? We know you have your website, unconditional-selflove.com.
Yes, it's on Amazon as well.
There you go.
Yes.
Glamazon, y'all.
Amazon.
So it's Amazon.com and your website as well.
Yes, absolutely.
What parting words do you have for Tony's audience?
I would say, just express your truth and say what you need to say to the people you need to say it, and act based on what you feel in your heart you really want to. And what will happen is life will then show up and take care of you and give you what you need, but not until you take that step. So the net can't appear until you jump. You have to jump first. And the reason why is because when you jump, you're so vulnerable that your heart is finally open. And the only way you can receive from life, love, happiness, joy, fresh air, is when your heart's open. So you have to jump. And like I said, that doesn't mean you have to just leave your job or leave your partner, although you can if you want to, if you really want to. But the baby step, like we all learn to crawl before we walk, and walk before we run, and run before we fly, you've got to be honest about what you're feeling. And just say, I feel unhappy, or I need a change, or I really want to just go and do this for myself. It's not that I don't love you, it's not that I don't care about you, I just need to do this for myself. And just go do it, because everybody's selfish, so it's not negative to love yourself. We've all learned that loving ourselves is selfish, when the truth is everybody's selfish. We just have learned a very destructive form of selfishness. And so when you're true to yourself emotionally and you act based on that, that's healthy selfishness, which none of us are familiar with, and that's what I call self-love. So you're worth it, but you won't matter to anybody until you matter to yourself.
Amen.
And nobody's going to respect you until you respect yourself. The only way to respect yourself is to respect what you feel, what you want, what you need now.
I call that
moving forward.
self-centered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not a negative self-centered.
No, self-centered, and centered is in
Yes.
centering
Alignment.
yourself and alignment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that's an important distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome. This is Blake Bauer. You've been watching Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. I'm Eddie Connor.
I'm Tony Sweet, and if you missed this, and if you're just tuning in, you're going to check us out on our YouTube channel, Truth Be Told with Tony and Eddie. Check us out on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and Stitcher. Please leave some comments. Tell us what you think about Blake. Make sure you follow him. And do you have your Twitter and social medias?
Yeah, if you just search my name, Blake Bauer, on Twitter, you'll find me. And again, I mentioned on Facebook, Blake Bauer, and You Were Not Born to Suffer. I have 2 pages there.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome, you
Well,
guys.
thank you so much.
Oh,
Blake.
thank you so much. Thanks for
Your
having
hands
me.
are nice and cold.
Thank you.
They are cold. That's
Thank you.
nice.
All right, we'll be back in just a minute on Truth Be Told right here on Universal Broadcasting Network.